In the summer of 1978, a luxury yacht vanished from Miami's exclusive Star Island marina with $6.4 million in cash aboard. No distress signals, no witnesses, no trace. The boat, the money, and the 3 men who took it disappeared into the vast Atlantic as if they had never existed. For 50 years, the case gathered dust in federal archives, dismissed as another unsolved maritime mystery. But in 2024, a routine dive expedition in the waters off Key Largo stumbled upon something that would crack open one of the most sophisticated heists in Florida history. What they found wasn't treasure, but it was enough to expose a ghost who had been hiding in plain sight for half a century. The discovery of a waterlogged safe, buried beneath decades of coral growth, contained no cash but held something far more valuable. A single piece of evidence that would unravel a crime so perfectly executed that investigators once called it impossible. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. On the evening of July 18, 1978, the Meridian Dream, a 68-foot Hatteras yacht, rested quietly at its berth in Miami Beach Marina. The vessel belonged to Vincent Carrera, a successful real estate developer who had built his fortune on waterfront properties throughout South Florida. Carrera was known for his lavish lifestyle, his collection of classic cars, and his reputation for conducting business deals aboard his yacht while cruising the turquoise waters of Biscayne Bay. The marina was familiar territory for such displays of wealth. Rows of gleaming white hulls stretched along the docks, their owners part of Miami's elite social circle. The Meridian Dream fit perfectly into this environment, its polished chrome and teak decking reflecting the setting sun as evening approached. It was a world where million-dollar transactions were sealed with handshakes and champagne toasts under the stars. That night, Carrera had arranged a private meeting aboard his yacht with 2 potential investors from New York. The men, introduced through mutual business contacts, were considering a substantial investment in a proposed marina development project in the Florida Keys. The deal involved purchasing undeveloped waterfront land and transforming it into a luxury resort destination, complete with private docks and exclusive amenities. According to marina records, the yacht departed its slip at approximately 9:30 p.m. with 4 individuals aboard: Carrera, the 2 investors, and Captain Miguel Santos, a trusted employee who had worked for Carrera for over 3 years. Santos was an experienced mariner who knew the waters around Miami like the back of his hand. He had navigated these channels countless times, both during daylight hours and under the cover of darkness. The plan, as Carrera had outlined to marina staff earlier that day, was simple: a brief cruise around the bay while the investors reviewed financial documents and architectural plans. The yacht would return before midnight, allowing the New York visitors to catch an early morning flight back to the city. It was a routine business meeting, the kind that happened regularly in Miami's luxury boating community. The Meridian Dream carried more than just passengers that evening. Secured in Carrera's private stateroom was a locked metal briefcase containing $6.4 million in cash. The money represented proceeds from recent property sales, funds that were being temporarily held offshore to avoid immediate tax implications. Carrera had planned to deposit the cash into a Cayman Islands account the following week, but the New York investors had requested to see proof of his liquid assets before committing to the marina project. In the world of high-stakes real estate development, such displays of financial strength were not uncommon. Cash was king, and showing potential partners that you had the resources to weather unexpected complications was standard practice. The briefcase, custom-made with reinforced steel and a digital lock, had been transported from a private security facility earlier that afternoon. As the yacht's engines rumbled to life and the Meridian Dream eased away from the dock, no one at the marina paid particular attention. The departure was unremarkable, just another wealthy businessman entertaining clients on a warm summer evening. The boat's running lights disappeared into the darkness beyond the harbor entrance, heading toward the open waters of the Atlantic. But the Meridian Dream never returned to its berth. By noon the following day, when Carrera failed to appear for a scheduled appointment with his attorney, concern began to mount. Marina's staff confirmed that the yacht had not returned overnight, and attempts to raise Santos on the radio went unanswered. The vessel's emergency beacon remained silent, and no distress signals had been received by the Coast Guard. The initial response focused on the possibility of mechanical failure or medical emergency. The Coast Guard launched a search and rescue operation, deploying helicopters and patrol boats to comb the waters between Miami and the Bahamas. The search pattern covered over 2,000 square miles of ocean, including popular anchorages and known fishing grounds where the yacht might have sought shelter. For 3 days, aircraft and vessels scoured the Atlantic. They found nothing. No debris, no oil slicks, no emergency equipment. The ocean had apparently swallowed the Meridian Dream without leaving a trace. The search was officially suspended after 72 hours, though Coast Guard officials privately acknowledged that the chances of finding survivors had been minimal from the start. The case was immediately transferred to the FBI due to the interstate nature of the crime and the substantial amount of money involved. Federal agents descended upon Miami Beach Marina, interviewing dock workers, reviewing security footage, and examining the yacht's berth for any clues about what might have happened. The investigation revealed that the 2 New York investors had used false identities and had provided fraudulent business credentials. The names they had given, Robert Maxwell and James Richardson, belonged to real individuals who had no knowledge of any Florida real estate deals. The business cards they had presented featured the logo of a legitimate investment firm, but the company had no record of employing anyone by those names. Phone numbers traced to disconnected lines, and the Manhattan addresses they had provided turned out to be vacant office spaces. Even more troubling was the discovery that the men had paid cash for their flights to Miami and had used fake identification to rent a hotel room near the marina. Surveillance footage from the airport showed 2 individuals matching their general descriptions, but the image quality was too poor to provide definitive identification. They had planned their approach with meticulous care, leaving virtually no paper trail. The investigation expanded to include Carrera's business associates and financial records. Agents discovered that the real estate developer had been involved in several questionable transactions over the past year, including deals with offshore shell companies and unexplained cash deposits. While not necessarily illegal, these activities suggested that Carrera operated in the gray areas of international finance, where large sums of money could disappear without traditional banking oversight. Captain Santos presented another puzzle. His background check revealed a clean record, with no history of criminal activity or suspicious associations. He had worked steadily in the marine industry for over a decade, earning a reputation for reliability and discretion. His family insisted that he would never have participated in any criminal scheme, and financial records showed no unusual deposits or expenditures that might indicate payoffs or coercion. Yet Santos had been the only crew member aboard the yacht that night. In most circumstances, a vessel of that size would have carried additional crew for safety and operational purposes. The decision to sail with minimal personnel struck investigators as unusual, particularly for a nighttime cruise with valuable cargo aboard. The FBI's Marine Crime Unit theorized that the yacht had been deliberately scuttled after the money was transferred to another vessel. This would explain the complete absence of debris and the failure of emergency systems to activate. Professional criminals with maritime experience could have coordinated such an operation, using the darkness and the vast expanse of the Atlantic to cover their tracks. Dive teams were deployed to search the ocean floor in areas where the yacht might have been sunk, but the depths and strong currents made comprehensive coverage impossible. The Florida Straits, with their complex underwater topography and shifting sands, could easily conceal a vessel the size of the Meridian Dream. Without more specific location data, the search was essentially random. As weeks turned into months, the investigation stalled. The false identities used by the supposed investors led nowhere, and no credible witnesses came forward with information about the yacht's final destination. The case file grew thick with reports and theories, but no solid evidence emerged to support any particular scenario. Insurance companies initially balked at paying claims related to the yacht's disappearance, citing the suspicious circumstances and the possibility of insurance fraud. Legal battles ensued, with Carrera's estate arguing that he had been the victim of an elaborate kidnapping and murder plot. The proceedings dragged on for years, generating substantial legal fees but no additional insights into what had actually happened. The FBI maintained the case as an active investigation for nearly a decade, but with no new leads or evidence, it was eventually transferred to the Cold Case Division. The file was marked as unsolved, joining thousands of other maritime mysteries that had been swallowed by the sea. The Meridian Dream and its occupants had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. In the years that followed, the case became something of a legend among Miami's boating community. Stories circulated about ghost ships and phantom crews, with amateur investigators proposing increasingly elaborate theories about what might have happened that night in 1978. Some suggested that Carrera had faked his own death to escape mounting debts and legal troubles. Others believed that the yacht had been targeted by international criminals who had learned about the cash through insider information. But as the decades passed, the Meridian Dream faded from public memory. New crimes captured headlines, and the waters around Miami continued to host luxury yachts and their wealthy owners. The case remained buried in federal archives, a reminder of how even the most sophisticated investigations could be thwarted by careful planning and the vast anonymity of the ocean. The mystery might have remained unsolved forever, relegated to the status of maritime folklore, if not for a chance discovery by a group of recreational divers in the summer of 2024. What they found on the ocean floor off Key Largo would prove that some secrets, no matter how carefully buried, eventually find their way back to the surface. The dive team from Coral Reef Expeditions had been conducting routine surveys of the artificial reef systems established along the Florida Keys when their sonar equipment detected an anomaly. Captain Rebecca Torres, a marine biologist with over 15 years of experience in these waters, initially dismissed the reading as another piece of hurricane debris. The ocean floor around Key Largo was littered with the remnants of decades of storms. Everything from overturned boats to displaced dock sections that had been swept out to sea and forgotten. But the signature was different. The object was too large and too geometric to be natural coral formation, yet it lacked the scattered randomness of storm debris. It sat in roughly 40 feet of water, positioned in a sandy depression between two coral heads that had grown undisturbed for decades. The formation had been there long enough for marine life to establish itself, but not so long that it had been completely consumed by the reef ecosystem. Torres decided to investigate. On the morning of June 15, 2024, she descended with her dive partner, marine archaeologist Dr. Marcus Chen, to examine what their instruments had detected. The water was unusually clear that day, visibility extending nearly 60 feet in the crystal blue depths. As they approached the coordinates, the outline of a man-made structure became visible through the filtered sunlight. What they found was a heavy-duty marine safe, the type used aboard luxury yachts to secure valuable documents and cash. The safe was partially buried in sand and covered with decades of coral growth, but its distinctive rectangular shape and the remnants of a combination lock were unmistakable. The metal had corroded extensively, and the locking mechanism had long since seized, but the basic structure remained intact. The safe's position struck Torres as unusual. It wasn't scattered randomly across the seafloor like debris from a sinking vessel. Instead, it sat upright in a deliberately placed position, as if it had been lowered carefully into the water rather than falling from a damaged boat. The surrounding sand showed no signs of impact or disturbance that would indicate a violent entry into the water. Chen documented the discovery with underwater photography, capturing the safe from multiple angles and noting its precise GPS coordinates. The coral growth pattern suggested that the object had been in place for several decades, possibly since the late 1970s or early 1980s. The specific species of coral that had colonized the metal surface were slow-growing varieties that required years to establish themselves in such formations. The dive team faced a complex decision. Removing the safe would require specialized equipment and permits from multiple agencies, including the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and the National Marine Sanctuary. But leaving it in place meant potentially losing valuable archaeological evidence that could help solve a decades-old mystery. Torres contacted the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, which in turn notified the FBI's Miami Field Office. The discovery of a safe in waters that had been searched extensively during the original Meridian Dream investigation raised immediate questions about its potential connection to the unsolved case. Within 48 hours, federal agents were coordinating with marine recovery specialists to extract the object from the seafloor. The recovery operation took place over 2 days, using a combination of airlift bags and careful excavation techniques to free the safe from its coral prison. The process was delicate, requiring divers to remove marine growth without damaging any potential evidence that might remain inside. The safe was eventually lifted to the surface and transported to a secure facility in Miami for analysis. FBI forensics experts found that the safe's exterior serial numbers had been partially obscured by corrosion, but enough remained visible to trace the manufacturer and original specifications. The unit was identified as a Mosler double-guard marine safe, a high-end model popular among yacht owners in the 1970s and 1980s. The manufacturer's records showed that this particular safe had been sold to a Miami-based marine supply company in March 1978, just 4 months before the Meridian Dream disappeared. The internal mechanism had been completely destroyed by decades of saltwater exposure, but the safe's contents had been partially preserved by the airtight seal that had remained intact until recently. Inside, investigators found the deteriorated remains of waterlogged documents, most too damaged to read. However, one item had survived the underwater environment with remarkable clarity. It was a laminated identification card, the type used for marina access passes in the 1970s. The card bore the name Thomas Henley and included a photograph of a middle-aged man with distinctive facial features. The marina listed on the card was Miami Beach Marina, the same facility where the Meridian Dream had been birthed. The access pass had been issued in June 1978, just weeks before the yacht's disappearance. The discovery of the identification card sent investigators scrambling through decades-old records. The name Thomas Henley had never appeared in any of the original FBI reports or witness statements. Marina employment records from 1978 showed no one by that name on staff, and background checks revealed no individual matching the photograph who had any known connection to the case. But the card's existence raised troubling questions. How had it ended up in a safe that had been deliberately placed on the ocean floor? Why had the name Thomas Henley never surfaced during the original investigation? And most importantly, who was the man in the photograph? And what role had he played in the disappearance of the Meridian Dream? The FBI's cold case unit reopened the file with renewed urgency. Digital enhancement of the photograph revealed details that had been impossible to discern from the original card. The man appeared to be in his 40s, with graying hair and a weathered complexion that suggested extensive time spent outdoors. His clothing was casual but well-maintained, consistent with someone who worked in the marine industry. Facial recognition software was employed to compare the photograph against databases of known criminals, missing persons, and maritime workers from the 1970s. The search expanded to include Coast Guard personnel records, commercial fishing licenses, and boat registration files. The process was painstaking, requiring manual comparison of thousands of images from an era before digital photography became standard. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired Miami Beach police detective named Frank Castellanos had kept personal files from his decades on the force, including photographs from marine-related incidents that had never been digitized. When news of the safe's discovery reached the local law enforcement community, Castellanos contacted the FBI with a collection of images from the late 1970s. Among his photographs was a picture taken at a marina safety inspection in 1979, showing a group of dock workers and boat maintenance personnel. In the background, partially obscured by other individuals, was a man who bore a striking resemblance to the face on the Thomas Henley identification card. The photograph had been taken at Dinner Key Marina, just a few miles from where the Meridian Dream had been birthed. The image quality was poor, and the resemblance was not definitive, but it provided investigators with a new lead. Castellanos recalled that the safety inspection had been conducted in response to a series of thefts from boats moored at various Miami area marinas. The crimes had involved sophisticated break-ins that suggested the perpetrators had detailed knowledge of yacht security systems and layouts. The connection between the marina thefts and the Meridian Dream case was tenuous, but it opened a new avenue of investigation. FBI agents began examining unsolved marine crimes from the late 1970s, looking for patterns that might indicate a coordinated criminal operation. What they discovered was a series of incidents that had been investigated separately but shared common characteristics. Between 1977 and 1979, at least 12 luxury yachts had been burglarized while moored at marinas throughout South Florida. The crimes were notable for their precision and the apparent expertise of the perpetrators. In each case, the thieves had bypassed sophisticated alarm systems and had targeted specific high-value items while leaving obvious but less valuable objects untouched. The pattern suggested that the criminals had advanced knowledge of what they were looking for and where to find it. This type of information could only have come from someone with access to the boats, either as a crew member, maintenance worker, or marina employee. The Thomas Henley identification card might have been the key to understanding how the thieves had gained such detailed intelligence. But Thomas Henley remained a ghost. No records existed of his employment at any marina. No social security number could be traced to that name, and no one in the marine industry claimed to remember him. The identification card appeared to be authentic, complete with the proper security features and marina stamps. But the person it represented seemed to have vanished as completely as the Meridian Dream itself. The investigation had uncovered a new mystery within the old one. The safe had been deliberately placed on the ocean floor, its contents preserved as if someone had wanted the identification card to be found eventually. But who had placed it there, and why? The answer would require investigators to look beyond the surface of the case and into the shadowy world of professional maritime crime that had operated in Miami's waters for decades. As the FBI worked to unravel the connection between Thomas Henley and the missing yacht, they began to realize that the Meridian Dream case was far more complex than anyone had imagined. The discovery of the safe was just the beginning. Someone had been operating in the shadows of Miami's luxury boating community for years, and the $6.4 million heist might have been just one job in a much larger criminal enterprise. The revelation that Thomas Henley might have been connected to a broader criminal network operating in Miami's Marina District sent the investigation in an entirely new direction. Special Agent Maria Santos, who had been assigned to lead the reopened case, began mapping out the connections between the various yacht thefts and the disappearance of the Meridian Dream. What emerged was a pattern of sophisticated criminal activity that had operated undetected for years. The marina thefts showed a level of planning and execution that suggested professional criminals with extensive maritime knowledge. Each incident had been carefully timed to avoid security patrols, and the perpetrators had demonstrated an intimate understanding of yacht layouts and alarm systems. This wasn't the work of opportunistic thieves, but rather a coordinated operation that had been studying its targets for months before striking. Agent Santos theorized that Thomas Henley, whoever he really was, had served as the inside man for this criminal network. The fake marina identification card would have given him access to restricted areas of the docks, allowing him to case potential targets and gather intelligence on high-value items stored aboard the yachts. The card's authentic appearance suggested that the operation had connections within the Marina Administration or security companies. The timing of the Meridian Dream heist fit perfectly into this larger pattern. Vincent Carrera's yacht had been targeted not randomly, but because the criminals had learned about the $6.4 million in cash through their intelligence network. The two fake investors from New York had been part of an elaborate setup designed to get Carrera and his money onto the open water, where they could be dealt with away from witnesses. But the safe's placement on the ocean floor remained puzzling. Why would professional criminals deliberately preserve evidence of their operation? The answer came from an unexpected source when Agent Santos decided to re-examine the original passenger manifest from the Meridian Dream's final voyage. The manifest listed 4 individuals aboard the yacht that night, but a closer inspection of marina security footage revealed a discrepancy. Enhancement of the grainy video showed 5 figures boarding the vessel, not 4. The additional person had been obscured in the original investigation, dismissed as a shadow or camera artifact. But with modern digital enhancement techniques, the 5th figure became clearly visible. The person appeared to be wearing marina worker clothing and had boarded the yacht separately from the supposed investors. This individual had remained on deck for only a few minutes before disappearing below, suggesting they had been there for a specific purpose. The timing indicated that this person had boarded while Carrera was still making final preparations in his stateroom. Agent Santos began to construct a new theory about what had happened that night. The 2 fake investors had been decoys, their primary purpose to get Carrera away from the marina, where he might have called for help. The real threat had come from the 5th person, someone who had gained access to the yacht through their marina credentials and had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The investigation took another turn when forensics experts made a breakthrough with the waterlogged documents found in the safe. Using advanced preservation techniques, they were able to recover partial text from what appeared to be a handwritten note. The legible portions included fragments of coordinates and what looked like a date from August 1978, roughly 1 month after the Meridian Dream's disappearance. The coordinates, when plotted on nautical charts, pointed to a location in the Bahamas known for its deep-water trenches and strong currents. This area had been searched during the original investigation, but the vast expanse of ocean had made comprehensive coverage impossible. The note suggested that someone had deliberately chosen this location for a specific purpose. Agent Santos arranged for a specialized deep-water survey vessel to investigate the coordinates. The search took place over several days, using side-scan sonar and remotely operated vehicles to examine the ocean floor. The depth in this area exceeded 200 feet, making it an ideal location to dispose of evidence that was never meant to be found. The survey team discovered debris scattered across the seafloor that appeared consistent with a vessel breakup. Metal fragments, pieces of fiberglass, and what looked like parts of a yacht's superstructure were spread across an area roughly 100 yards in diameter. The debris pattern suggested that the vessel had been deliberately destroyed rather than simply sunk intact. But the most significant discovery came when the ROV investigated a deeper section of the trench. There, Partially buried in sediment were the remains of what appeared to be a human skeleton. The bones were scattered and incomplete, but forensic analysis would later confirm that they belonged to a male individual approximately 40 to 50 years of age at the time of death. The skeleton was found with the corroded remains of a wristwatch and a metal belt buckle. The watch, though badly damaged, retained enough of its serial number to be traced to a manufacturer's database. The records showed that this particular model had been sold to a Miami jewelry store in 1977, purchased by someone named Miguel Santos. The name sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Miguel Santos had been the captain of the Meridian Dream, the trusted employee who had supposedly disappeared along with Vincent Carrera and the fake investors. But if Santos was dead on the ocean floor, who had been operating the yacht that night? The discovery forced investigators to completely reconsider their understanding of the case. Santos hadn't been a willing participant in the heist, but rather another victim. The real criminals had somehow gained control of the yacht and had eliminated anyone who might have posed a threat to their operation. The precision of the crime suggested that they had been planning it for months, possibly years. Agent Santos returned to the Marina records with fresh perspective, looking for any connection between the Thomas Henley identification card and the yacht's crew. What she found was the employment record that had been overlooked in the original investigation. A maintenance worker named Thomas Henley had been hired by the Marina in May 1978, just weeks before the Meridian Dream's disappearance. The employment file was thin, containing only basic information and a single reference from a previous employer. But the reference led to a dead end when investigators discovered that the company had never existed. The address listed was a vacant lot, and the phone number had never been assigned. Thomas Henley had created an entire false identity to gain access to the Marina. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Henley had used his position at the Marina to study the routines and security measures of high-value targets. He had learned about Carrera's business practices and had discovered the planned meeting with the New York investors. The fake investors had been part of his crew, professional criminals who had played their roles perfectly, but something had gone wrong during the execution of the heist. The discovery of Miguel Santos's remains suggested that the operation had turned violent, possibly when the yacht's captain had attempted to resist or escape. The criminals had been forced to eliminate witnesses and dispose of evidence more thoroughly than they had originally planned. The safe found off Key Largo had been Henley's insurance policy. By preserving his false identification and other evidence, he had created a way to expose the operation if something happened to him. The coordinates in the note had been his way of documenting where the real evidence could be found, including the remains of the victims. But Thomas Henley himself remained elusive. Despite extensive searches through criminal databases and missing person reports, no one matching his description had ever been found. He had vanished as completely as the yacht he had helped steal, leaving behind only the carefully planted evidence that would eventually expose the truth. The investigation continued for months, but the trail had gone cold decades earlier. The other members of Henley's crew had likely scattered to different parts of the world, taking new identities and leaving no trace of their involvement. The $6.4 million in cash had probably been laundered through offshore accounts and shell companies, making it impossible to track. Yet the discovery of the safe and the subsequent investigation had achieved something that seemed impossible for nearly 50 years. The mystery of the Meridian Dream had finally been solved, even if justice remained elusive. Vincent Carrera and Miguel Santos had been the victims of a sophisticated criminal operation that had targeted Miami's luxury boating community with ruthless efficiency. The case officially closed in early 2025, though the FBI maintained active files on Thomas Henley and his unknown associates. The safe that had preserved the truth for nearly 5 decades was put on display at the FBI's Miami field office. a reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried forever. For the families of Vincent Carrera and Miguel Santos, the discovery brought a mixture of closure and renewed grief. They finally knew what had happened to their loved ones, but the knowledge came with the realization that the criminals had escaped justice. The ocean had kept its secrets for nearly 50 years, releasing them only when time and chance aligned to expose the truth. The Meridian Dream case became a cautionary tale about the vulnerabilities of Miami's luxury maritime community. New security measures were implemented at marinas throughout South Florida, and background checks for employees became more rigorous. But the case also demonstrated the persistence of dedicated investigators who refused to let a mystery die, no matter how many decades had passed. The legacy of the Meridian Dream investigation extended far beyond the resolution of a single case. It exposed the sophisticated criminal networks that had operated in Miami's waters during the late 1970s, networks that had likely been responsible for dozens of unsolved maritime crimes throughout the region. The discovery of the safe had opened a window into a world of professional criminals who had treated the luxury boating community as their personal hunting ground. Agent Santos compiled a comprehensive report that linked the Meridian Dream heist to at least 15 other unsolved cases from the same era. The pattern was unmistakable once investigators knew what to look for. Each crime had involved inside knowledge, sophisticated planning, and the complete disappearance of evidence. The criminals had operated with impunity for years, protected by the vastness of the ocean and the limitations of 1970s investigative technology. The report became required reading for marine crime investigators throughout the Southeast. It detailed how the network had recruited insiders, established false identities, and used the legitimate maritime industry as cover for their operations. The methods they had employed were so effective that similar techniques were still being used by modern criminal organizations decades later. For the diving community that had discovered the safe, the case became a source of both pride and soberness. Rebecca Torres and Marcus Chen had unknowingly solved one of Florida's most enduring mysteries, but their discovery had also revealed the dark side of the waters they explored regularly. The ocean that had provided them with countless hours of wonder and discovery had also served as a graveyard for the victims of sophisticated criminals. The artificial reef where the safe had been found was quietly redesignated as a memorial site. A small plaque was placed nearby, honoring the memory of Vincent Carrera and Miguel Santos without revealing the specific details of their deaths. The location became a pilgrimage site for divers who understood the significance of what had been discovered there. As the investigation officially concluded, one question remained unanswered. Thomas Henley had vanished completely, leaving behind no trace of his real identity or whereabouts. His carefully constructed false persona had been so convincing that even decades of investigation had failed to pierce the veil he had created. He had become the phantom of the case title, a ghost who had orchestrated one of the most sophisticated heists in maritime history, and then disappeared into legend. The FBI maintained an active file on Henley, though most investigators privately acknowledged that he was probably dead. The criminal networks of the 1970s had been notoriously violent, and someone who knew as much as Henley would have been a liability once the operation was complete. His decision to preserve evidence in the underwater safe suggested that he had understood the risks he faced. Yet there were those who believed that Henley might still be alive somewhere, living under another false identity, and perhaps still operating in the shadows of the maritime world. The skills he had demonstrated in 1978 were timeless, and the vulnerabilities he had exploited still existed in many forms. The ocean was vast, and for someone with his expertise, it would always offer opportunities for those willing to take them. The Meridian Dream case closed with the kind of resolution that satisfied investigators but left the public wanting more. The mystery had been solved, the victims identified, and the method of the crime exposed. But the criminals had escaped, taking with them not just $6.4 million in cash, but also the secrets of how they had built and operated their sophisticated network. In the end, it was a single corroded safe, placed deliberately on the ocean floor by a criminal who understood that truth has a way of surfacing, that brought justice to two men who had been forgotten by everyone except their families. The discovery proved that no crime is truly perfect, no secret permanently buried, and no mystery beyond the reach of time, technology, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The waters off Miami continue to host luxury yachts and their wealthy owners, but the shadow of the Meridian Dream serves as a reminder that beneath the surface of paradise, danger can lurk in the most sophisticated forms. The phantom who orchestrated the heist may have escaped earthly justice, but his legacy lives on in the lessons learned and the security measures implemented to prevent others from following in his wake.